The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. Wealth Builders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Welcome to episode 69 of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for Wealth Builders, and I'm joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to talk to you today.
Good to speak to you as well, Kevin. And today's episode, we are inviting a guest who's from America. His name is Todd Tressider, and he's known as the Financial Mentor. And this is actually an interview that I conducted last year for Escape the Rat Race, and we thought that it was relevant to bring to the ears of our Wealth Talk listeners as well today, Kevin, because whilst Todd is obviously from America, his principles are exactly the same as we teach, aren't they?
Yeah, it's always good when you hear somebody talk who doesn't come from the same culture, doesn't come from the same language. He doesn't use wealth builder language necessarily. But what he is saying, though, is exactly what we say, but with a slightly different twist. And you remember we listened to Daniel Priestley, and he said, you know, wealth builders and he are the same, but with a slightly different angle. And this is the same with Todd. So what it's saying to me really is the wealth builder principles are absolutely certain, and that this guy is a smart cookie who's really got lessons and journey, actually not dissimilar to mine, in, you know, creating his own journey, basically plowing his own field, and then discovering other people were reaching out to him for help. And then he helped them, and then he sort of realized he had gaps in his knowledge to plug as people were asking questions that he really wanted to solve. And I think so he comes from shared values, shared principles, just a different country. And I think look out for those of you who are keen followers of wealth builder principles. Just listen for the lessons, as always. You know, listen for what you hear and see if you can, if he gives you a different angle that sinks something in your brain. You know, get something there that perhaps I hadn't done and you hadn't done, Chris, but Todd does. And if he can do that, then that will be a great result. And that's what I'm expecting to happen as a result of this interview.
Yeah, so Todd's got an engineering background. He's a former hedge fund manager. He definitely likes formulas and mathematics, and that comes through in the interview today. But let's head on over now and listen to our conversation with Todd Tressider. So Todd, we are on Escape the Rat Race Radio today. Many of our listeners, they are kind of juggling a full-time job with trying to build their business, trying to build their wealth, and time is of the essence. Everyone is short of time. We know that, we hear that a lot. And would you mind sharing, Todd, was there ever a time when you were in the rat race yourself, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, to some extent, I mean, I remain in the rat race to this day, to the extent that, you know, there's all these opportunities, all these really amazing things that I want to do and get involved in. And so it's not like I'm just sitting around laying on a hammock eating bonbons, you know, I mean, there's a lot to do in life. And so I think the rat race, as you're terming it, though, is where you're stuck inside a job and you're like the hamster on the wheel, just spinning the wheel. And so, I was in that. I came out of college. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And so I had to work like everybody else. But I just had this kind of crazy thought. I said, well, supposing I just engineered my life to result in financial freedom, like what would that look like? And so I just decided, you know, so I started studying people who built wealth and just trying to figure it all out. Like, how would you design your life to result in financial independence? And so it worked. I was financially independent 12 years later.
Yeah. So a man with a plan. And is it possible to build wealth without a plan?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, you know, you're basically giving me a layup to pitch my course, which is expectancy wealth planning. And the reason it's the first course I ever created was because I couldn't start coaching a client. So it was an outgrowth of my coaching, right? Because I didn't start with courses. I coached people one-on-one for 20 years. And in the process of coaching people, what I realized is you literally can't coach a person to financial independence unless you have a plan. The reason for that is the plan sets the backdrop. It's the context from which all decisions you make are made. And if you don't have a plan, then your decisions are haphazard. They're not cohesive. And so what ends up happening is you end up approaching financial independence without a plan. You end up approaching it not strategically, not efficiently. There's tremendous amount of waste of resources, both time and money. And so the plan is critical. You have to start with a plan. So yeah, I agree with you fully on that. It's funny you brought that up.
Yeah, and simply just too many distractions in the world right now, aren't there, not to have that plan and keep you focused?
Well, that's the thing. See, what happens is people would contact me and they'd say, hey, Todd, should I invest in XYZ? Or is it more important I start a business than do this investment? Should I quit my job and do this instead? And there was all these questions. And I was always like, well, what's your plan? Because your plan determines how you're going to approach this, because your plan is where you integrate. Here's the thing about proper wealth planning when you do it right. You have to there's 3 asset classes that you build wealth with, right? You've got real estate, paper assets that your broker and financial advisor could sell you. And then you've got business asset class. So only one of them is normally included in a financial plan, right? The traditional financial plan. But a wealth plan done right includes all 3 asset classes. Now, here's the rub. Each of these 3 asset classes has unique characteristics. And so they're not all the same, and they don't all work for the same people. And that's why, you see all these gurus out there and they're all making the same mistake. They'll say, oh, you got to do real estate my way, and you got to do a business. That's how you get rich. Or you do the stock market and you do it this way. And that's how everybody's got their little secret to riches, right? What they're not telling you is that each one of these strategies has its own characteristics. And so you've got to be able to match the characteristics of the strategies that you employ in the asset classes you use to your specific characteristics in your life, your time frame, your goals, your resources, what your interests are, what your skills are. All these things will shape what asset classes and strategies will work for you. That's how you put together a wealth plan correctly. And that's why you can't answer all those questions without it. Because that wealth planning process takes you through values clarification. It takes you through all these different issues you have to go through to integrate it into a wealth plan that will actually work for you. Does that make sense?
I love that. It's so on the money there, because I often say myself, it's not that the strategies don't work. It's just that you're not the right fit for that strategy. And you can easily go to a weekend seminar and someone on stage is going to sell you the next best thing. And it sounds easy and you just dive in. But if it's not right for you, if it doesn't fit your personality and all those other things you just mentioned, then, you're almost on a losing streak from the beginning, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've got clients that are whole hog on real estate, and I've got other clients that can't stand real estate and wouldn't touch it, right? Or like me, I did it with advanced paper asset strategies, and that works really good for like an engineering mind. I've got kind of an engineering mentality, even though I'm not formally an engineer. And so advanced paper asset strategies can be very effective for that type of mentality. Other people, brilliant entrepreneurs. I've got clients that are just brilliant entrepreneurs, and they made millions in just a few years off their entrepreneur work. And so it's just, you've got to figure out like what's going to work for you, and then you integrate and develop a plan around that. And you've got to understand that there's not only 3 asset classes, but there's all these strategies within each asset class that you can employ. And then here's one more thing you have to understand is market opportunity varies over time. And so that's another dimension of the puzzle, is you have to match it with market opportunity at the time. So, it's like there's dimensions to this. That's why people that come up and they oversimplify it, it's not complicated, really. I mean, I just explained it in 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It's not overly complicated, but then there's the implementation. How do you do that, Todd? How do you bring these things down and integrate them into a plan that will actually work for me? That's the key issue.
Well, I mean, if you take it back to like one of the oldest books, like Richest Man in Babylon, spend less than you earn and invest the rest. It's kind of like the basic rules, right?
Well, yeah, but here's the funny thing. That's everything you need to know about finance in one sentence, right? 2 sentences, whatever it is, 1 or 2 sentences. And it's true. Everything you need to know about finance to build wealth can be contained in about 2 sentences. The question is, how do you do that, right? So it's spend less than you earn, save the difference, and invest it wisely. Bam. That's everything you need to know. But now you've got to understand, well, how do you spend less? How do you earn more? How do you invest it wisely? How do you do these things? That's the key. And then which ones are going to work for you? What's a wise investment for one person won't be another. Because investments themselves are not inherently wise. They aren't inherently good or bad. It has to do with your plan, how you incorporate that strategy. Because see, the thing I teach is investing done right is a process. It's not a product.
Yeah.
And what everybody thinks is investing is a product. They're looking for that good investment. They want to get Microsoft or Google in its infancy, right? And that's not how it works. I mean, very rare cases will that work. There's a few outliers where they actually got wealthy that way. most people, they don't do it that way.
Wow. Ooh, we've already opened so many so many questions that I could head with here, but let me see. I want to ask you, Todd, what's the difference between building wealth and investing? Because I think there's inherent difference in your mind, right?
Huge difference. Yeah. So investing is just, so first of all, everything goes back to your expectancy equation and your future value equation, right? So in other words, the math that governs wealth building is governed by two equations, the expectancy equation and the future value equation. So expectancy is probability times payoff in its simplest form, and that determines your wealth growth rate. And then future value equation is expectancy times time, right? So it's how it grows over time. And so, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's intuitively how you understand it. All you really need is an intuitive understanding. You don't have to have formal mathematics. You just have to intuitively get this and be able to apply those rules intuitively. And so when you go into it, what you understand is that wealth is actually the compound growth of both your personal resources and your financial resources. And so when people hang up on just an investment strategy, what they're thinking is they're getting stuck in a box of thinking. They're thinking, oh, it's just about my W-2 income or my wage income, how much I save from that income, and then I just need a better investment strategy because I need a higher rate of return. But they're not realizing, well, wait a minute. Paper asset investing, which is what most people think of when they think of an investment strategy, right? Like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, that kind of thing. When paper asset investing is the most limited investment class. So there's strict mathematical limits to the growth of a paper asset portfolio. And I go into that in the course. It's probably beyond the scope of this interview, but just trust me on it. And intuitively, you know it. You don't even have to trust me, because if you look at the greatest investors of all time, none of them exceed 20% compounded, right? And yet you can find tons of real estate investors and tons of entrepreneurs where their return on investment greatly exceeds 20% compounded. Like that would be not even that great in the entrepreneurial class, an entrepreneurial investment class. And so what happens is the paper asset class is extremely limited, but everybody thinks, oh, I just need a better investment strategy for my portfolio, and that's going to solve my investment problems. No, it's not. That's just one little tiny aspect of the whole thing. So it's not that it's wrong. It's just not the whole truth. And what happens is when you start looking at it that way, it limits your understanding of the different things you can do to improve your total return, to improve your wealth, to increase your security, diversification value. There's so many things that you can dig into once you expand your understanding of it.
So Todd, if I may, just try and strip this down and keep it a real basic term. For someone listening right now, and they just haven't dived into this world, but they are committed. They are committed to investing the time, the next 10 years. And I know that obviously you've written books around retiring within 10 years. And they say, okay, I'm prepared to commit to whatever it takes over the next 10 years to do this. Where do you start with someone? If you're coaching a client at the beginning, what are some of the early questions that you would ask them?
Well, as I said before, I would go straight into designing their wealth plan, right? So that would be the starting point. So first of all, I'd assess their situation today, because their situation today and their goal and their time frame implies what's possible and what isn't, right? So for example, if I have a anesthesiologist who makes $500,000 a year and only has accumulated $200,000 or $300,000 in savings, I've got a clarity in what the situation is, right? He doesn't need any help with earnings capacity. There's no way he's going to have higher earnings capacity than in his current career, right? So there's no need to bring in entrepreneurship. Instead, what he needs to do is figure out how to channel more of his income earned into his asset category and how to compound the asset category more effectively. And so just those couple numbers of how much he makes, how long he's been at the career, and what his savings are will pretty much determine his plan. And I can go straight into that with him, right? Or you take somebody like, let's say you got a school teacher and they're making $40,000 or $50,000 a year and they have summers off and they're really good with hand tools and love working on stuff. Well, they're never going to really build wealth on a teacher's salary, right? Because they're already at kind of a minimalist living standard off the teacher salary. And so it's pretty hard to save your way to wealth or to accelerate your wealth plan. So they're going to have to look at both real estate and the entrepreneurship class in order to do something. They have to break out the math of compound returns that are limited in the paper asset category. So if you notice, what I'm doing in each of these examples is I'm stepping right into what I open the conversation with, which is matching the characteristics of the person's life their goals, their skills, their resources, and I'm matching them up to the strategies that are viable given their goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah. And again, keeping on that topic of kind of knowing yourself, we use a tool called Wealth Dynamics. It's one of the many psychometric tools out there, but it's really great and points people in the direction of their natural path towards wealth. Do you have any tips for people who really just don't know where to begin and, need that little bit of direction, almost like pointing the compass for them?
For me, what it is a narrowing process.
Okay.
You take the whole sphere of what's possible, which is almost unmanageable. It's so large, right? And that's why they can be confused and everything. There's just so many possibilities, so many angles you can go. But there's only a few that's going to work for any one person or is going to make good business sense for any one person in their situation. So you just start narrowing down until you can get to something. And then they design a plan around it. And if it gets them excited and it moves them into action, then great, you're on track. Yeah. If they find it stifling, if they're running into trouble, then you're off track and you have to revisit the plan because it should be very motivating and exciting.
Yeah, like I guess that, rewording my question there for you, Todd. If someone's working with you, they have the added benefit of being able to leverage your knowledge. If they're kind of approaching this by themselves and they're overwhelmed by the number of choices, the process for kind of just saying no, that's definitely not for me.
Well, there's 3 asset classes, right? So you can just start looking at them and eliminating them. If you have no entrepreneurial experience and no entrepreneurial desires, you can throw it out the door, right? If you don't want to save your way to wealth over a lifetime of earning and compounding, then paper assets may not be a viable strategy unless you have a very high income or you're a very good saver. If you're really into frugality, right? Then paper assets can be workable. So you could eliminate that unless, you're frugal or you have extremely high earnings and you don't feel a desire to live a lavish lifestyle, right? Because in order for paper assets to work in a reasonable frame of time, you have to save a very high percentage of your income. So it either means you have a very high income, like I did when I ran the hedge fund, or you spend very little. So that's the paper asset category if you want to do it in 10 years, like you were saying. Otherwise, you have to go to real estate and business. And so some people are very open to business and business entrepreneurship. Some people aren't. So you can close that one. The single highest probability success category is real estate. And that's because it's intuitive. The average person who lives in a house can look at a neighborhood and know if it's good or bad. They can look at construction without great construction background and know if there's deferred maintenance or not. They know what makes a good home, a good floor plan. So it's very intuitive, whereas paper assets are very counterintuitive. They work almost opposite what your intuition does. So again, you kind of have to look at what you can bring to the equation and then start eliminating based on what your predispositions are. Is that helpful? Does that narrow it down some?
It does indeed. And it brings me on to this word leverage. So I'd like to understand from you, Todd, what is leverage in your definition and what are the different types of leverage? What are different things that can be leveraged to help you build wealth?
Yeah, so you're referencing my book, Leverage Equation, which was an outgrowth of, it's literally 2 lessons in my course that each contain, there's like 10 videos or something like that, 11 videos in there around leverage. And so I got to back up a second to explain this, okay? In conventional financial planning, you have paper assets. And paper assets, they have very limited risk management capabilities. You mainly have diversification with conventional assets, conventional financial planning, but there's some more things you can do with advanced paper asset strategies, but very limited risk management. And then you've got almost no leverage opportunities. You could only apply financial leverage, which is very dangerous. It's the only type of leverage that cuts both ways and is dangerous. And I wouldn't encourage anybody to use financial leverage in traditional asset allocation. So basically, there's no leverage opportunities for practical purposes. So then what happens is you go into what I call the advanced planning framework. And that's where you bring in the other 2 asset classes, which is real estate and paper and business entrepreneurship. Now, the unique characteristics of that is when you bring in these other 2 asset classes, there's all kinds of creativity you can do to apply them. And that includes leverage. And so what that does is that changes the expectancy formula. So the whole idea in the advanced planning framework is that, again, your wealth growth is determined by your expectancy formula, right? So it's probability times payoff. Well, real estate has the single highest probability of a positive payoff. Business entrepreneurship has a low probability. As everybody knows, there's a high failure rate in business, but you can manage it in a way that the payoff equation is extraordinarily favorable. And that's through like lean startup principles and other ideas you're probably familiar with. And so if you approach it from an expectancy framework and you understand how to do it, you can manage in the advanced planning framework extraordinary high probabilities and high payoffs, which results in rapid wealth growth. And so when I teach leverage, what I'm doing is I'm teaching the positive payoff side of the equation. So it's how you multiply what you can do in those two asset classes. So you're going beyond just the limits of your personal resources of time and money, right? So you apply other people's money, you apply other people's time through employment, you apply other people's networks, you apply advanced marketing principles. So you're leveraging other people's sphere of influence, and on and on and on. So there's 6 total types of leverage that are covered in the teaching. And it's all about how you build wealth by using resources other than your own. And so that's the principle behind leverage, is going beyond your own resources.
Todd, I know you have 2 children, and I've listened to some of your other podcasts where you've talked about passing on some of the principles and the information, and sometimes they want to listen, maybe sometimes they don't, right? But for many of our listeners now, of course, they will have children, and bringing this knowledge through at an early age is of course really important. We hear so many people talk about, why is this not taught at school? What's your opinion on this?
Why it's not taught in school?
Mm-hmm.
School's not designed to make people rich. School's not designed to serve that function. I mean, school's designed to create a functional, educated class of kids. I don't know the reason why it's not taught. I mean, I have my thoughts on it, but I don't think they're all that relevant or important. I think the more important thing is, how do you pass on this education to your kids? And the only thing I've ever seen that works is to walk the talk. Your kids learn from what you do. And they learn far more from what you do than what you say. And they will pick up on any contradiction between what you say and what you do very quickly. As an example, my use of the phone. I may not like what they do with the phone, but then I tend to overuse it myself. And so they will call me out on it regularly. But in terms of walking the talk with finances, I guess I've done pretty decent with it because the kids do it. And so I've seen them, like, in how they purchase clothes, how they build their wardrobe, how they shop for an airline ticket, how they do things. They're pretty savvy about it. And even like now, we had 4 drivers in the household with 2 cars over the summer because my daughter came back from college and my other daughter's a teenager. And we managed with 2 cars and nobody was complaining. It's like we just worked it out. And with 4 drivers in the household, that's kind of crazy, but then everybody managed, and occasionally we used Uber, and I rode my bike a bunch. I walked some places. Friends would pick us up. We just made it work because I didn't want to pick up cars for the summer. It's just a wasteful thing to do. And they understood that. So I don't know. Is that answering it? You walk the talk. You go through decisions with them in real time and you work through them, and they build a pattern of how they think about money and how they value it.
Mm. Yeah, and I guess it's just simplifying the principles which you've shared already today, and embedding them to some degree without preaching to your children about this is what you have to do.
Well, some of it's not even applicable yet because they're not even in the wealth building part yet. I mean, one's a sophomore in college and the other is a junior in high school as we record this. It's not part of their framework, so I don't shove it down their throat. The only part of that's part of their mental framework right now is spending money and how you get good value for spending money and how you equate the amount you spend with what it costs you to earn it and create it. So like all that really basic personal finance stuff is where their head is at now. It's rather interesting. My daughter is a video production major in college. And so she was actually producing the video testimonials for my course over the summer, which was really interesting, right? Because
leverage, right?
What's that?
Leverage.
Well, and she's earning money, and it's deductible to the company, and she needs the money, and it's all good business, right? And good experience for her because now she has product to show. But it was funny. The point of the story was not that. The point of the story was she came back to me, and actually, so that is the point of the story, right? Because I'm walking the talk. She knows exactly what I'm doing. That it's tax deductible. It's a way to get money to her. I get value for it from the business. Blah, blah, blah. And it's a flexible job for her so she could still have fun for summer. and because she doesn't have to report into me each day as a boss. Anyway, so yeah, she got a lot of principles that way. But then the other thing that was funny, she came back to me and she goes, "Hey, Dad," she goes, "Man, I've been in those testimonial videos and your course sounds pretty interesting. I think I'm going to want to take it sometime." And I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay. So, who cares what Dad has to say? But what these other people said about Dad is kind of interesting." Made any big secret out of my discontent for the financial planning profession on average. I mean, there are exceptions. There's some extraordinarily good financial planners, people who do hold their clients' best interests at heart and have true knowledge of how the business works, the wealth building business, that is. But by and large, that's not true. And so the whole reason I got in this business was because when I ran the hedge fund, I was dealing with clients and I saw what was going on with the financial planning side of stuff, and it was atrocious. And it's never really resolved itself even to this day. There's been some improvement with fee-only financial planning, and there's been some other changes that have helped. But basically, the whole reason I built a financial education business was to balance out what was going on in financial planning. So I think, financial planning, here's the thing. Only do business with people that add more value to life than they cost. If they put more money in your pocket than they cost you, then great. And so take that filter to your financial planner and just see if he's going to add more money than he costs to your portfolio. Most will fail that, and that's unfortunate. And that's one of the reasons I got in this business and why I sell education only, not financial planning or investment products, is that, I believe that's just a valid thing. You want to add more value to your clients than you cost them. And so when you charge annual percentage of assets under management fees, and you have cookie cutter management systems and things like that, which you have to run a business like that, it's tough. So did I answer your question? Basically, be careful. Their financial planning as a whole is a sales business, not an investment management. They present themselves as investment experts, but in general, they farm out the investment management underneath them because they're busy gathering assets. That's how they get paid. Is they get paid by the amount of assets they manage as a function of the assets they manage. Again, I'm generalizing, right? There's exceptions. So just have your eyes wide open. Understand what the business is. It's a sales business. Their job is to gather assets. They are generally, as a whole, not investment experts. And they can be helpful. There's some things they can be helpful with, but be careful. There's a lot of conflicts and biases and things that you have to watch out for. So is that helpful? Does that get it?
Yeah, sure. And linked to that again is also just really looking at, in terms of the costs of the people around you, but also the costs of the investments and charges and how much that can eat into your returns, right?
Yeah, and I've written on the subject. You can probably find an article on my site to link to where it's not obvious all the fees you're paying. A lot of the fees are hidden, right? And so you've got to understand all the layers of fees involved in the financial planning profession, both what are overtly shown to you and what are hidden behind the scenes and built into other fee structures. So you've really got to become an expert on the fees to realize how much they cost you. I've got a video I give away on my site for free. You can link to it. It's called how your financial advisor is costing you 75% of your retirement income, ... or more. In other words, it's actually conservative that they're costing you 75% of your income. And I just go through the really simple math that explains why that's true. And it's shocking to people. They just don't understand how this stuff works. And so when somebody says, your financial advisor is costing you 75% of your retirement income, they're like, oh, that can't be possible, right? I mean, how could that work? And you go through the math and it's obvious. It's simple. And so that's all explained in a free video on the site. Again, you just got to understand this stuff and learn and educate yourself.
Yeah. All of these resources that you're referring to, Todd, I'm definitely making sure that these are all going to be available in the show notes for today. So anyone listening now, just check those out, click the links. And of course, I'm sure you'll share some more information at the end, Todd, of how people can get connected to you. But I want to talk about the word debt. So someone who wants to build wealth, but maybe they feel like they've got this ball and chain around their ankle of debt. What can you advise or help in terms of managing that?
So when I teach this stuff, not just this topic, but almost all topics in finance, I teach both the art and the science, right? So the scientific answer to your question would be you either pay off your debt or build wealth depending on what's going to give you the highest after-tax return. right? So that's what you focus on, is the highest after-tax return. That's the science. Not terribly useful. One, because you don't actually have a crystal ball in the future, so you don't actually know what the after-tax return on the investment side will be. But you do know the after-tax return on the payoff debt side because you know what your debt is costing you, right? So tough to weigh out that equation. But that's the science answer that gets you the highest wealth growth. Problem is, it doesn't really work that way. We aren't robots. We aren't perfectly rational beings. We're emotional human beings. And so it varies person to person what the correct answer is. For some people, it really makes sense to pay off the debt because they just feel that debt like such a burden on their shoulders. They can't even think with it. It messes all their decisions. They have to have a clean slate to move forward and accept financial risk and do different things. So for that person, paying off the debt might make sense. For another person, they might not care the least about the debt, right? And so what they feel is they've got to they want to move forward. If they're not moving forward and they're not building assets and they're not playing the game offensively, and offensively I don't mean like offense like rude, I mean offensively like offense and defense, right? Paying down debt is defense, building wealth is offense. And so some people, they have to be moving on the offensive side of the game in order to be excited by it. And so for that person, you go straight to building wealth because that's what excites them. And you figure out how to build the payoff debt in behind it. And so for people that want more on that, I've got an entire article on the subject that goes through in detail, including all the tax ramifications and everything. It's like excruciating detail. It's called Pay Off Mortgage Early or Invest, and it's on the site. And so that one is just like, it goes through every little detail of the decision process. And it even explains how I've been on both sides at different points in my life. Like I had a house with a mortgage when I didn't have to. I had the assets. But my assets compound faster than the mortgage cost me, right? So I was playing the math equation on that one. Now I'm older. You can tell from the video. I'm an older guy now. And so I prefer to take a knee. So like this house we remodeled that I'm in right now, it's an old 1940s house downtown that we remodeled and fixed up. That one's paid off. We just paid it free and clear. And so I don't want the financial leverage. I don't want the mortgage. And so it's an emotional decision. It's not a rational decision in that case. So I've been on both sides of the fence, and I disclose it and explain it and go through the whole detail. Is that helpful? Does that explain it?
That's great. And I'm going to link to the article as well. So that'll be very useful for people. And thanks for referencing the fact that we are recording this on video as well, Todd, because I often forget. I know a lot of people are listening kind of through iTunes on the podcast, just through the headphones. But yeah, we've got the video going on today as well. So you can see Todd over in Nevada. I'm here in London. And, the beauty of technology connecting us up here. So
amazing.
On that note of technology.
So here, I'll throw that. That's another good one, is just to be like amazed by things, right? Because it just makes the day more enjoyable. I mean, it's amazing that you're in London right now. Yeah. I'm in Reno. We're talking real time in a conversation. It's just, and it's a video and it's getting recorded and the cost is almost, it's phenomenal. Yeah.
And then
right. So that just, it makes the day more interesting, right? To just appreciate and be in gratitude over the insanity of that, how cool it is.
Yeah. And then, we've got over, listeners in over 145 countries that are going to be checking this out over the next week or so. So it's pretty amazing the spread that this can achieve. Yeah. So Todd, another thing that I think a lot of our listeners will be interested in is actually how you've built this as an online business over recent years. And when you started out, did you have any idea that it was going to grow to the level it's at today and the reach that you're now achieving?
No, I did not. I had no idea at all. It started out, it was just a kind of a weird question I had in my mind is, so when I quote unquote air quote, let's put air quotes around my head here. When I air quoted, retired at age 35, which obviously was a long time ago, it was over 2 decades ago. I was still fascinated by personal finance. I always have been. It's just, I'm a junkie for it, investing, personal finance, wealth building. And so I was still reading books on it and studying it, even though I was quote unquote retired. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? And so I wondered if I could actually help ordinary people create extraordinary financial results. That was like the question that was in my head was I just unusual, or do the principles that I had learned and applied that I'd figured out back when I decided I wanted to engineer my way to wealth, right? And I did it in 12 years. And I was like, could those principles be applied? And it turned out about 3/4 of it could, and some of it couldn't. And I was missing a whole bunch of stuff. And I didn't know that until I started coaching people, right? And I started finding all the holes in my teachings because the thing about coaching that's phenomenal is when you're on the phone each week with the same person over and over, your stuff either works or they fire you, right? They're not going to get on the phone and work with you if they're not producing results and pay the bills. It's just not going to happen. And so it's not like with a book where you're an author and you get up on a podium and you lecture and people applaud and you can walk away and your stuff can stink and nobody really says anything because it all sounds good. With coaching, it has to work. It has to be effective. And so I started working with it as just a boutique coaching practice. That's what's called financial mentor, right? I tried to get financial coach. It was already taken. And so it's financial mentor. And that's because, it was going to be just a boutique coaching practice. And then the coaching practice took off and I was oversold and I kept raising the rates. And there was a waiting list and the whole thing. It was a good problem to have, but it got out of control. And then, so I shut it down. I literally just shut the coaching practice down because there's no way for me to leverage it. There's nobody else that has the same knowledge and understanding and background. And so I'm trying to productize Todd, right? So I'm trying to put Todd in a box, and the knowledge I developed over the 2 decades of coaching and the decade of hedge fund investing, put it in a product form to where it can reach more people at a better price point. And that's where growing the platform really kicked in gear, right? So originally it was just going to be a little, a website for a boutique coaching practice. And then it just expanded from there as the vision for it expanded.
Yeah. And obviously now creating intellectual property through your courses and books and those, generating streams of income, that's just the compound effect, isn't it? And the reach, it's incredible. So yeah, once again, thank you for all of the content that you share. It really is phenomenal.
Thank you. I try. It's some people really resonate with it, and so that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, and I know for you, Todd, you've set a personal goal of 12 books. How many are you currently at so far?
The 7th one is almost done. So it's at just about 50,000 words. It needs one more really tightening edit before I can take it to the most difficult part of the whole process, which is the content edit. Because that's when you send it to professional content editors and they come back and they tell you everything you did wrong. And it's like you're done with the book and emotionally the baby is born. And then the content editor comes back and says your baby is ugly and these are all the problems with it. And so it's really a difficult stage, but that's where it's at now. It's basically written. I got to do one more edit myself. And then I go through 2 rounds of content edits and then it all improves from there. Yeah. So that'll be the 7th book. That'll be on risk management. And so the title's risk management or investment risk management. And then the subtitle would be how to make more by risking less. And that's going to be the companion book to leverage, because leverage is about how you make more, right? It's about how to ramp up the return. Risk management is how you control the risk. And that's what tilts your payoff equation. Those 2 books are like bookends, if you will, or flip sides of the same coin. And they're how you control the payoff equation in expectancy analysis.
Well, it's clear for everyone listening today that you're certainly a man who knows what he's talking about, Todd. And if people would like to go and check out your website and obviously start downloading some of the resources, I know you've got a whole bunch of calculators there for them. Where do they head to, Todd?
So it's financialmentor.com is the website. So 2 words, financial and then mentor put together, financialmentor.com. And there's a ton of free resources. The only paid stuff is the books and the one course that's available. That I referred to at the beginning of the interview. Other than that, everything's free. So there's like 80 financial calculators, because wealth is math, as I alluded to earlier, but a lot of people don't like doing the math or they're not comfortable with it. So these calculators online do it for you. So there's 80 financial calculators, all free. And then there's, 1,000, 2,000 printed pages of content, all free educational content that you can get. So yeah, just come over, and there's a mini course, 52 Weeks to Financial Freedom. So for new subscribers, I give away a book called 18 Essential Lessons of a Self-Made Millionaire. And then I also give away a mini course, which is 52 Weeks to Financial Freedom. And no, you won't get rich in 52 weeks. It's just like, it's a 52-week process to set the stage for it, to set the foundation for it.
And obviously, we're talking to people who are in different countries around the world. Do the principles, do the strategies, do they translate, across all continents?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, actually. About 95% of it does for common law countries. The thing that doesn't translate is like, U.S. tax law, things like that. And even then, a lot of the U.S. tax law is similar. So, Canadians have an RRSP, we have an IRA. I'm not sure what the British have. So, it's 95, 99% translatable. the important stuff is the details might get missed. So, somebody just has to read it with their own twist. I've got people from all over the world in the course, and I've never heard one complaint of it being too US centric. I've tried to be conscious of that. The books are more US centric because that's where the bulk of the sales are. But even then, the principles are universal.
Yeah, well, I can vouch for the articles, and as I say, the huge amount of wisdom and knowledge that you share, Todd, is incredible. So thank you again. Thank you for being a great guest. But I've got one last question before I let you go, Todd,
right,
which I always ask my guests, and that is, for those people listening right now, they maybe are squashed up on the tube, or they're sat in the traffic jam on their way to or from work, and they really know that there's something bigger and better inside of them. They're really, really driven to achieve that financial and personal freedom. But there's something holding them back. There's just something stopping them. And most likely it's fear. What would you like to say to those people listening right now, Todd?
So I think Nike said it well, just do it. And I know that sounds cheesy, like, oh, it's so cavalier. That's not going to get the guy off the couch. But here's the reality, okay? We're all going to die. Some of us sooner than others, right? I'm way older than you. And so you're going to die anyway. So you may as well live the adventure of life, right? And so, yeah, you've got fears, fear of what people will say, fear of how you're going to screw it up, fear of how you lose, fear that you're not good enough, fear that you're not worthy, all these fears. Screw it. I had all those fears. I still have a lot of those fears. You just do it anyway. You just start doing it. And over time, you kind of learn that you're actually halfway decently competent. But it comes, I started out with here's a disclosure. The whole reason I built wealth in the first place was because of a lack of self-confidence. And, I was looking on it, hey, I'm going to be successful in society's terms, and that'll prove how good I am. I was trying to prove I was worthy. And of course, once I got there, then I realized I didn't prove anything at all. But that's, side note. So, when I say everybody has those fears, me included, I do. You just have to step into it and do it. And the whole reason I can do it is two things. One, it's the adventure of life. I don't want to go to my grave with regrets of, oh, if I'd only tried this, if I'd considered doing this, if I'd gotten off the couch that day when Todd said that crap rather than, continuing to sit there, right? If I'd taken action rather than not. I don't want to live with those regrets. And so I'll just go take the action, because you're going to work anyway, right? Your life, you're going to spend life working either way. So you may as well work towards what you want to create. And then on top of that, the other thing that allows me to take action is risk management, right? Which is why I'm coming out with that other book. If you're doing careful risk management, then your wealth is just a function of sample size. Once you understand how to set your expectancy, positive expectancy, how to manage risk, you will get the end result if you play the game aggressively enough and long enough. You will get there. It's a function of sample size. It's just a mathematical truth. And so get going now and start your sample size now. Don't waste any more time.
Hey, so I guess starting point would be you need a plan, Kevin. We actually did a podcast episode a few weeks ago on that very topic as well. And there's different routes to financial independence, but you've got to have a plan and you've got to work out the right plan for you.
Yeah, it's like a different route to any destination. Once you know the destination, you could take the slow, leisurely route, up mountain, down dale, the scenic route, or you can go directly, the fastest route possible. And that's your choice over how long you want to take in order to get there. But absolutely certain, you need a plan. And I think I would concur with that, because I think he says it not quite in the same language, but that's going to be a common thread. It's similar language, isn't it, Chris? Which he says, when people started asking him questions, Todd, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I invest in this or that? Should I consider this or that? And he said, they're always the wrong question. The question is, I haven't got a clue what's right for you unless I know what your plan is. And that's the same thing here. So, no doubt, nobody likes planning. We know that. It's sort of easier to drift, isn't it? And just to react to whatever wind acts upon us. And we've had that quote before, the old Jim Rohn quote. But I think absolutely without a plan, it's possible to build wealth. You can do it by accident, can't you? If you've got a high income, Chris, and you save a lot of money in the stock market and the stock market works for you, you can probably do it in, 30 years, 20, 30 years. But if you want to do it in less than that, you absolutely and definitely need a plan and then combine the different assets.
Absolutely. Well, you've mentioned assets there. And of course, we have our plan, which is the 7 Steps to Wealth, which we teach our members. And of course, that's looking at 7 different assets. And Todd talked about 3 today, which I guess are the core 3, which are paper assets, being investing, business, entrepreneurship, and then property as the third one.
Yeah. And then, that's similar. That's in good principles. They are the main ones. We widen it a little to give us a greater degree of focus on what you want to do. Like, for example, we talk about your use of the value in your home and the use of the value in your pension, and he doesn't talk about those as different assets, and that's okay. That's the whole point, isn't it? You see what you see and react to what you like. But I think the principles are there. If you think about what he was saying there, is if you like paper assets, which is stocks and shares and investing, and however the language you would use for that, it's the journey there is going to be slow. It's going to be kind of it's going to be volatile, but you can get there if you've got high level of investment you want to make, and if you can make that on a regular basis from your income, so high income, no time, then that can no spare time. Then the paper asset strategy or the investing strategy can work, and that's what most people do, Chris, don't they? They start a job and then they build up their pensions, or they build up their ISAs, or they build up their savings. However they do that, and hope that, by the time their working life is over, 30, 40 years later, there's enough money put by to keep them going for the next 30 or 40. I just think it's a very dangerous strategy, but it's doable. But I think he doesn't just talk about that. He talks about the combination of investing in paper. He didn't go into detail, Chris, but he talks about kind of advanced risk mitigation techniques, which is all very highbrow, but basically meaning, if you're going to invest in something that's fundamentally volatile, then you need to put in some risk mitigation in there. And we teach that as well. And there are a number of different strategies, or tactics rather, that you can use with paper assets, with investing, to minimize your risk. So, we teach those. So I would agree with him. So I'm finding myself almost every time I listen to Todd just kind of nodding and saying, he's actually saying exactly the same thing as we're saying, just got an American accent.
Yeah. And again, another thing that we talk about often is overwhelm. And we know the things that hold people back from building their wealth. The first is not having a plan, right? And we've talked about that. The second is simply, where do I begin? There's so many different ideas, so many strategies. How do I know which one is the right one for me? And it's a matter of knowing yourself, which is where Wealth Dynamics comes in. And we obviously use that as a tool with all of our members right at the beginning to help focus you on the things that are your natural strengths. You shouldn't be spending time on things that are not right for you. And Todd said that as well, right? If you're not interested in business and entrepreneurship, then, just eliminate it. And sometimes eliminating things is the best way forwards.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I definitely think that's a lesson that we could pick up from Todd, which is that process of elimination. Because if you eliminate, you're reducing overwhelm. So that's a smart point. No, I like that very much. And I think we try and do that wherever we can when we're looking at leverage. But I think we come at it from which is your best form of leverage rather than which is the ones to completely eliminate from your plan. And maybe we could do that. Maybe we could start to introduce that concept of getting rid of things that just simply are not a right fit for you, or not a right fit for you right now.
And something else that Todd said was wealth is compound growth of both personal resources and financial resources. And I think, again, that touches on leverage, doesn't it, Kevin? We're often saying that so many people are sitting on assets which they're even not aware of, or certainly not leveraging to the extent that they could be.
Well, leverage is the great powerhouse that kind of gives rocket fuel to all kind of wealth plan, rather than just the paper asset where there's no leverage at all. So you heard him say that, right? There's no leverage in paper. You can't go to the bank and say, I want to buy these shares. Will you lend me some money? They'll laugh you straight out of the door. No, you can't do that. But other assets you can. And I think the use of leverage, not just personal leverage, using your right wealth dynamic, using what you're interested in, all those things, because we know actually that when it's done over time, that the whole wealth building journey, Chris, is transformational. It's transforming finances, but more importantly, it transforms yourself. You become different as you kind of see things, experience things, participate in things. And as you do that, you become different because you see more. And when you see more and you look at it, he called it a big adventure. I like that. I think that's great language. We talk about the ROI of
Success path. Yeah.
No, I mean that one specifically, Chris. The ROI of being curious. That you're never more than one relationship, opportunity, or idea away from a complete transformation of your wealth, which is why I love to listen to other people, because they give you great ideas. But he said, you were talking to him about the technology, right? And you were saying, isn't it great that I'm talking to you from London, he's in Reno, and we can just do this, and that was whatever it was, a year or 18 months ago. And he's saying, yeah, it's just fantastic. Life's an adventure. And that's the whole point. When you go on an adventure, it's implies you're going to enjoy it, and it implies you're going to be testing yourself, and you will be changed as a result of that. And so I like the idea that wealth is an adventure, and wealth is a journey of personal change and financial change. And actually, more importantly, I think, Chris, in the end, when you are confident on your journey, that your journey now becomes predictable, you can't be blown off course because you've got expertise, because you've got assets behind you. And then you can teach those assets to the next generation. And he lightly touched on that too, didn't he, when he talked about his girls and they're following just some basic habits of walking the talk. I think he said it was, he does things in a certain way. It doesn't sound to me like he lives a lavish lifestyle. He talked about cars and having a couple of cars and not a car for each member of the family. So it sounds like, he's got a set of principles, which is great. And his family are living those principles too. And this is true when you determine to become completely financially independent. You will be able to pass on life lessons to the next generation, so they can not just accept what you've done and say, hey, Dad, or hey, Mum, thanks. But actually, they can take on some of the wisdom and then go on to expand this for the next generation and the generations to come. And I think that sort of family adventure is a wonderful thing, which is why we ask people, don't we, Chris, at the start, to think about naming their wealth plan. Naming, that plan becomes a business in its own right, has a name to it. And then that name gives you the reason why, which is the thing that keeps you going when, as always, when you're on an adventure, you're going to be stretched in some way or other, either stretched intellectually, financially, physically, mentally. We know building wealth is not easy. It's doable, but it isn't easy, because if it was easy, there'd be 95% of the population will be wealthy, not 5% of the population.
Absolutely. Well, it all comes down to having that plan again, doesn't it? And the accountability, the support, all of these things which we know are important to help you achieve those goals. And one final thing, I smile because I know that this is, shall we say, a bugbear sometimes of yours, Kevin, and this is, financial advisors, and are they adding value to your life, or are they, as you say, putting that siphon in and actually taking more out than they're putting in?
Well, I think it's a very smart point to say that if you're going to engage with someone, and what I mean by that is professionally pay somebody some money to do something for you, please make sure they're adding more value than they're taking away. And that, and I agree with him, some financial advisors will add more value. The vast majority, sadly, will not, because they are selling a product that somebody else invented. And as a result, they're selling for their funds under management. And we know this to be true. It's not like we're trying to say something that's unusual here. We know it's true. And what's a shocker is, he has written, I think it's an ebook, which says the financial advisor will be taking 75% of your income over time. And I would encourage anybody to go download that, because it's a shocking read. And while I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon and say all advisors are bad, I'm not. However, not all advisors will be adding more value than they're taking. And this is true of wealth builders. We don't want to encourage anybody to invest time and money with us unless we're actually adding value. And it's a condition of doing business with us, Chris, isn't it? That we're adding value, or, we don't want the money, because the whole point about what we do is to help people achieve more wealth. It's called Wealth Builders. I could have surreptitiously named the business Wealth Reducers so that people pay us, we get rich, and then, they get, they suffer by being frustrated for all of their life. And that's absolutely the opposite of what needs to happen. So, thanks for bringing that point up, Chris. A couple of other points, just to make sure we don't miss them, just on the fact that he talks about 3 assets and not 7, is, and I think he makes 2 good distinctions as well. So on the paper one, he said paper slow but can work, but you need risk mitigation. Property or real estate, obviously, has the highest probability of success because it can be replicated. And that's certainly true within our community, Chris, isn't it? People go for the high probability of success with property in the UK. And but business has got the highest potential payoff. So yes, there's risks, and he talked about that. But the thing that we do, and we'll be focusing on that very soon, Chris, in a mastermind session that I'll be running called the Enterprise Club here at Wealth Builders, is to encourage business owners or would-be business owners to be thinking about how to build businesses with recurring income from day one. And so the more you can build a business that builds recurring income, which means creating recurring value. If you go back to the same point, you want a business that adds value, doesn't take value away from people. Then if you can build a business that creates recurring value for your customers, then they'll favor you for many, many years to come. And then that gives your business incredible predictability and gives you the highest possible potential payoff. Life-changing sums of money are possible in business, which is the reason why I like to focus on it, because it forces you to think about value. It forces you to think about the end user and the problem, solving a problem for somebody as opposed to being in a business type. So I don't tend to worry about, well, what business are you in and what's the problem you're solving, and can you solve that problem in a recurring way? So these are common themes, Chris, that run through probably every podcast from 1 to 69, the continual process of adding more value than you're taking away and seeking to get that for yourself and seeking to pass that on to others.
Yeah, and hopefully we continue to add a little bit of value every week through these podcasts. So if you're enjoying them, as we always say, please do share it with someone else who you think might enjoy it as well. And if you happen to be on your podcasting app, be it Spotify, iTunes, and you haven't left a review for us yet, then we'd really appreciate that as well. And we've mentioned about, obviously, our plan, which of course is the 7 Steps to Wealth program. And we're not too far away from opening up again, Kevin, in September. So for anyone who's interested in learning about what that process is and how you can work with Kevin and myself and all of our other members, then head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/7 steps to wealth to find out more there.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So that'd be nice to see some new intake in September. Looking forward to that very much. And what's next on our agenda, Chris?
I don't know, but if people have got some spare time before the next episode, then I'd say definitely head over to Amazon and search for Todd Tressider. As you mentioned, Kevin, he's written, I think, about 5 different books, and all of them are really, really great, and they're just short reads. So some good additional education there for anyone who's looking for it.
Absolutely, and I rate Todd enormously, and thanks for remembering that interview, Chris, and bringing that back to the table. And looking forward to speaking to you again soon on the next episode of WealthTalk.
Thanks, Kevin. See ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the Wealth Builders membership site to help you create, build, and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.